Fillers with the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also write into the show by emailing matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. This week on Patreon, I will have by the time you guys are listening to this, I will have already had an exclusive full-length episode where I'm running down all the winners of this year's IFGA Awards winners. So that'll be on the Patreon this previous Monday, if you're listening to this day of release. And then I also have several Patreon potpourri episodes, which are full-length episodes covering movies I watch for awards and top 10 list consideration. There's also a plethora of Stephen King book reaction recordings and series and TV and other TV reaction stuff. Coming up in the next year, I'm going to be doing Flanagan Fridays, which is where I review something Mike Flanagan related on every Friday evening. And then I'll have Sci-Fi Saturdays, starting out with Foundation Season 2 episode reviews. So all of that's on Patreon. Once again, you can sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, which includes Letterboxd at Obsessive Viewer and on TikTok at OV Podcasts. And in our feature review this week, we'll be reviewing the new Yorgos Lanthimos film Poor Things, which opens in theaters December 22nd. And for our secondary review, we'll be reviewing Emerald Fennell's sophomore feature, Saltburn, which played in theaters in November and will be available to stream on Amazon Prime beginning tonight, if you're listening to the day of release, December 21st. And we also have some new stuff we'll talk about. But before we're doing all that, I got to introduce my guest. Joining me tonight is my friend and IFGA colleague, Mitch Ringenberg, whose work can be found on MidwestFilmJournal.com. And you can also follow him on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/wounded_kite and on Twitter /X/Elon Musk's midlife crisis platform at wounded_kite as well. Welcome back to the show, Mitch, and thank you for giving me a reason not to watch Wonka. How have you been?
Yeah, happy to serve and
Yes.
glad to be back on the podcast. I've been doing great,
Nice.
as we kind of talked, before the show, just catching up on a lot of the year-end films.
Yes.
And I felt like actually this was a particularly strong kind of like end of year slate. Usually this kind of time makes or breaks sort of the movie year for me, I have found, and I thought this was a pretty strong one overall.
Oh yeah, there's been some that I've been texting Mike, co-host is on sabbatical, who we've been texting back and forth about just movies and stuff like we always do, but I keep texting and saying Oppenheimer just dropped on my list because something else kind of just bumped it up or bumped it from that. And I think spoiler for our main review tonight, I mean, Poor Things, I think Poor Things is going to end up just taking Oppenheimer maybe out of the top 10, which is crazy.
Yeah, not to spoil my thoughts either, but yeah, Poor Things is my number one currently for the year. So I was really excited to talk about that tonight. And Oppenheimer, I really enjoyed. I think it's still in my top 10. It's one that I can really see going up or down on a rewatch, and I'm really dying to rewatch it.
Same.
Problem is, like so many movies these days, it's 3 hours long, so it's hard to kind of it's kind of hard to prioritize it and squeeze it in when there's always something else you can be watching.
absolutely. And like my whole thing has been like, okay, well, the awards, like we're recording this December 14th. The awards the awards meeting that we're having for the IFJ is this Saturday. So like after that, we'll have like a week or two of the rest of the year. And I'm weighing like, okay, there are certain movies that I haven't seen yet that I'll need to check out, but also I need to revisit some things to kind of reassess where they end up, because Oppenheimer I haven't seen since July, and I don't know if my memory has just gotten a little bit unkind toward it. And not that it's bad, not that I dislike it at all. I love that movie, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a recency bias with it dropping down out of the top 10, basically.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just kind of looking back at some of my year-end lists from the previous 5 or 6 years when I really started making those in earnest. And it's funny, like looking back, like a lot of movies I have like in my top 3, I'm like, I haven't thought about that movie since then.
Yeah,
and some movies that I've grown to love and appreciate so much, like, maybe weren't even in my top 10 that year, or were like near the bottom. And that's the kind of thing about like top 10 lists. I almost, as I've gotten deeper into writing about movies, talking about movies all the time. Well, I've always talked about movies all the time, but as I've gotten older, I feel like rankings are fun, star ratings are fun, but I also feel like they're kind of bullshit too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And like the big thing that I have in my brain is like I need to constantly remind myself that these are rankings, these are ratings in the moment. Like a top 10 list is a top 10 list of the year. Like if I were to go back and like reassess, like I think I had the Christian Bale movie, is it Scott Cooper? Is that the guy's name?
Out of the Furnace.
Out of the Furnace. I had that on my top 10 that year.
Yeah, I remember that movie.
Yeah, and
the first time anyone's mentioned that movie.
I know. And that's the thing. I actually I took some time like in the last few months and I just like on a whim made like this private letterbox list where I went through all of my top 10 lists from that I have on file, and like I just added the titles in those top 10 lists that I've only logged once, that I've only seen one time, just to see how many top 10 movies do I have like on record that I've only seen the one time. It's a lot. I think it's like maybe 20. Well, I don't know if a lot is necessarily it. I don't know how many there were, but like there's a lot where I'm like, yeah, I don't know if it would make the list. I had freaking Elysium on one in 2013.
Oh, wow. Wow. There's a director who's really continued to fall from grace.
Yep.
Although we did have a movie this year that people kind of like mildly defended, I guess.
Yeah. I wasn't too hot on it. Gran Turismo.
I didn't see it. But.
Yeah, it's fine. The problems that I had with it were script based, in terms of visual, like the visual representation of the racing. Like he does some interesting things by like implementing like visual things from the video game into it. But aside from that, just the story wasn't there. It just didn't work.
Wait, so Matt, you're telling me Neil Blomkamp made a movie with impressive and unique visuals, but a terrible script? That
first time for everything. First time for everything.
Right.
But before we get too in the weeds and everything with all of this, I did want to highlight some of your work and everything. So I wanted to ask, like I've been mentioning this on the podcast the last few weeks, but over at Midwest Film Journal, there is an ongoing series on the work of Samuel L. Jackson. Do you have anything on that series?
I did not. I missed that one.
Okay.
I think the last one I contributed to was a couple months ago with the David Cronenberg. Rundown, which they're not going to do a Cronenberg series on Midwest Film Journal without old Mitch.
Sure.
Having his say. I wrote about a history of violence for that.
Oh,
one.
Nice.
Tried to do like one of his more like unconventional, or I guess like less stereotypically like Cronenbergian.
Right.
So
that's one of the few that I've seen. He's one that I have some blind spots on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And this is something that we'll talk about a little bit with Poor Things too. He's one of those filmmakers that they're kind of intimidating to me because I growing up and coming of age as a movie fan, I was more reticent toward like shielding myself from like very aggressive body horror or like grotesque things because like I'm just a little scared little boy. But so like any idea of like weird, crazy stuff that has potential to like really stick with me, I'm like afraid of. So I've kind of steered away from some things, and like it's one of the reasons why like Yorgos Lanthimos is one that I have some blind spots in, that I kind of get a similar vibe from him that's just kind of like weird.
They're both typically like very cold filmmakers.
Yes.
And it's funny you bring that up because I had like the absolute opposite impulses as
nice
young movie lover. I always was always a real sicko and towards things that were as violent and weird as possible, which has, as a result done irreversible damage to my psyche. But,
That is fair. Eventually I'll get to that level too. Yeah, I've just damaged my psyche with just the run of the mill social anxiety and second guessing of myself. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But recently on Midwest Film Journal, you have reviewed Poor Things and Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, neither of which I have read. I apologize.
No worries.
I haven't had a chance to. I wanted to read your Poor Things review as prep for this, but I watched Saltburn immediately after work today because I had this thing where last night I watched Poor Things and then I was like, okay, I have to go in the office tomorrow. I can go to bed kind of late tonight. I can fit in Saltburn and then go to bed late and then just be really, really tired at work. And then I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't I just go to bed and then go home after work and watch the movie during like normal hours, like a normal person?
Right.
And then sure enough, I got kind of distracted. So I like finished the movie like an hour ago, basically. So, yeah.
Nice. It'll be fresh in the mind. And yeah,
Exactly.
I just reviewed Poor Things, Thanksgiving, both movies I really liked a lot. And I actually have a review of American Fiction that I already wrote, but it's running next week as well.
Nice.
Release. Yeah.
Very nice. Cool. How is American Fiction? That's one I haven't circled back to during award season.
Mild recommendation.
Okay.
Nice. It's a very tonally odd movie. It's like a mix of, for better or worse, it's very ambitious, but it's a mix of like, for better or worse, like really wild, like Spike Lee flavored like satire that's like very aggressive and in your face and like laugh out loud funny. And that's the best aspects of the movie. And mixed with almost like very maudlin, like, saccharine, like Lifetime Tyler Perry like family drama that like didn't work as well for me. They really clash in a way that didn't totally gel for me. But like that said, like it's trying to do a lot of things. And like for me, when you see a movie that is trying to juggle so many themes and so many different like so many different tones and storylines, like to me at least, I'm like, I would rather see that like an ambitious misfire than something that is just like the same thing I've seen a million times. So I'd say it's worth watching, if not entirely successful.
Nice. Maybe I'll squeeze it in before the end of the year.
Jeffrey Wright and Sterling K. Brown are both like incredible in the movie as well.
And I don't doubt that both of them are like, they're two of like my top performers in general. So
amazing. Yeah. So just to see them get a much needed spotlight, I think it's worth the seeing alone.
Nice. So you can find Mitch's work on MidwestFilmJournal.com. I'll have links in the show notes and everything, of course. I also keep forgetting to mention every week that we are on YouTube now, at least in audio form. So YouTube and YouTube Music, basically all the podcasts are on there. So if you want another way for us to notify you anytime there's a podcast that is uploaded, go subscribe on YouTube. and yeah, subscribe and hit that little bell icon. But yeah, very excited about that. I might start posting stuff on YouTube. I'm not sure. Just basically cross posting the TikTok stuff over there. So check that out. Link in the show notes for the YouTube page. Before we get to our Poor Things review, Mitch, I do have a couple of news items to kind of just talk about, to get your take on, if you'll indulge me for just a moment.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. So first is that we're recording this two nights after I recorded last week's episode, which came out last Thursday, which was today, if like in the current timeline. So anyway, on that episode, like, news broke that Andre Braugher had passed away, which is very sad. Like, it's one of those celebrity deaths that kind of just, it stings. It's one of those that stings. But it was announced today, or additional details came out, that he passed away from after a short bout with lung cancer. And there, I just kind of wanted to get your take on, like, Andre Braugher's career, any standout performances, or any fond memories of him as an actor.
Yeah, so I'm remiss to say that I actually have only maybe seen like 2 or 3 episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, wow.
I know it's a very beloved show, and I know he gave one of his just career best performances over the course of that show. So I'm not super familiar with kind of what he's most known for. However, maybe it's appropriately with your Stephen King, your love for Stephen King.
Yes.
When I think of him in The Mist.
Absolutely.
Which is a highly underrated and underseen in general Stephen King film that actually took me too long to get to. I didn't see it in theaters because a bunch of my friends who were very wrong in this, they all saw it and it was horrible.
Oh, God.
They went and saw it in theaters, and that I shouldn't see it. So I had read the novella, and I was like, I guess I just won't see it. And then I caught up with it a couple years later and loved it. Loved Andre Braugher's performance in it as well. Love that movie. But that is really, honestly, the only thing that really stands to mind. I know, or comes to mind when I think of him. However, I really know that he was kind of noteworthy because he balanced, like, he was kind of a master of like these comedic performances as well as like heavy dramatic performances. And that's awesome that he was able to kind of exhibit that range in his career.
Oh, absolutely. He was also, another Stephen King connection is that he, I haven't seen this, but I don't remember when it was, but I think it was the 90s, or maybe early 2000s. The Salem's Lot, adaptation. It might have been the one with Rob Lowe, but he played Matt Burke in that. And like, rereading Salem's Lot a couple of months ago, I knew that in my mind. I was like, I need to go watch that like soon, because that is the type of role that I think he probably nailed. And then on the Mist front, today I've just been thinking about this. I don't know if you've read Doohickey by Stephen King.
I have not.
Okay.
But I know what it is.
Okay. So for the listeners, the Doohickey is a story about a guy who suffers a horrible accident. A crane drops on his truck with him in it. He has a couple of amputations and phantom pain, and like he's basically has some brain damage as well. So he's very well off. He goes to Florida, buys a little beachfront house, and crazy Stephen King stuff starts happening, including him painting the future through his phantom arm. Very cool, very gothic horror. It's very, very interesting. But the central characters of that, there's this kind of friendship between the main character, whose name is escaping me right now, but and then this guy named Jerome Wireman. They have this bond throughout it. And for like today, I think I've had this thought before, but like today especially, I was just thinking like, it would have been like in another universe, it would have been amazing to see like someone adapt Doohickey and cast Thomas Jane and Andre Braugher to kind of reunite them from the Mist for that. Like, and obviously now that'll never happen, but I just thought that would have been, I don't know. That's just what's been mulling around my brain today. So yeah.
Yeah, they had great chemistry.
Absolutely.
And I actually did not even know the plot of Doohickey. That sounds really fascinating. I was a Stephen King junkie when I was in middle school and high school, and I poured through his 70s and 80s stuff.
Nice.
Some of his 90s stuff. And unfortunately, like, huge blind spot for me is basically anything Stephen King has written in the past 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've read some of it, but there's a lot, like, most of it I have not read.
Okay. Have you read 11/22/63?
I have not.
Okay.
I also know that's the one that people say is like maybe the best one he's written in the past 20 years.
I will say it is my favorite book. Just there you go. Oh. Favorite book.
Okay. All right. Consider that ordered on Amazon.
Yeah, it's nice. It is. Yeah. It's magic. And it's the melding of two of my favorite things, Stephen King and time travel. I mean,
I will make that a priority for my reading list, because I've been wanting to jump back into the world of Stephen King, just because I feel like it'll be the shot of nostalgia that I'm always searching for.
Yes. And he's great. As I like to say, we stan a king. But
absolutely.
Yeah. But check out Tower Junkies if you haven't already, listeners. But a couple other news pieces I want to just throw out there is one, I've never watched Curb Your Enthusiasm. Which is a big, huge blind spot for me. But it was announced today that it's ending with season 12. Jesus, season 12. You're a fan?
Huge fan. Yeah. Huge fan. I've watched Curb Your Enthusiasm since. I mean, my dad is a huge fan of the show. I remember being 10, 11 years old and laying in bed. Where my at the time my room was on like the main floor of the house. And I remember laying in bed and just hearing the theme song, which is like this goofy tuba like music all the time, like almost every night, like, or every once a week on HBO. My dad watching like the new episodes, and I got really into it in high school. And yeah, I'm a huge fan. I know that Larry David has to be pretty deep into his 70s at this.
I think so. Yeah.
At this point, and so obviously he's worked on this show for almost 25 years.
Yeah.
It will be like the 25th anniversary come next year when this final season airs. So I mean, that's an incredibly long time to have such an amazing show, and it really never lost steam. I mean, there's some seasons that are not as great as others, but I mean, even at its weakest seasons were still better comedy than most things you'd see on TV. And how many shows can you really say 25 years in, even if those seasons were released so sparingly, right? Are still that strong? You know?
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So I'm excited to go back and watch as much of it, all of it really eventually. But so that was news that broke today. And then finally, the final thing I want to bring up before we get into our Poor Things review is just real quick. Did you watch the trailer for Civil War by Alex Garland that is opening in theaters April 26th?
I did.
How do you feel about Alex Garland?
I loved Ex Machina. I loved his collaborations with Danny Boyle.
Oh my God, yes.
That's I honestly, like, I can't even like The Beach. All right, like the movie. I haven't read his novel.
Sure.
But I love his collaborations with Danny Boyle. I mean, those probably remain my favorite things that he's been a part of. I loved Ex Machina as well. I mean, it's basically like the best Black Mirror episode.
Oh my God, yes.
Black Mirror episode.
Yeah.
Annihilation, I thought, was a very fascinating movie that I need to rewatch because I still was like, I'm not sure if everything cohered for me in like a satisfying way. Did not see Devs.
Devs is very cool.
I would like to watch Devs.
Yeah.
I think I hated Men, like, and not for any of the stupid, male rage reasons that a lot of like, incel YouTubers probably
right.
for. I just found it to be incredibly like. I found its messaging to be very obvious and heavy-handed.
Yeah.
I felt like I watched the trailer and that was the movie, Some really striking imagery, but it all added up to pretty much nothing for me.
Yeah, that's a movie that I think I've only seen it once. I should probably revisit it. It was fine. Two amazing Letterboxd reviews that I've read that I always think about. One is just some person, it's like the top rated one, or the most liked one. It's this was so scary. I'm glad British people aren't real. And then my personal favorite was a 1-star review that I thought this was just so perfect. Someone put, "Very cool, Alex. Hope she sees this." Which is just, it's beautiful. But yeah, really, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like his collaborations with Danny Boyle are some of my favorite movies. Like 28 Days Later, Sunshine, those are no shade to The Beach, but those are desert island movies for me. Those are movies that I can and have watched multiple times. I will never get sick of. I have I recorded a Patreon exclusive like commentary track for Sunshine years ago, but it's like those movies are incredible. And Ex Machina is like you said it perfectly. It's the best Black Mirror episode. Yeah, and then it's just kind of been a little bit of diminishing returns, I guess. Annihilation was unique and interesting, but isn't something I go back to like Ex Machina or anything. I really liked Devs the one time I saw it, and I feel like that is a little bit more in line with like what he was doing with Ex Machina, so you might be into it. And then Men, yeah. So what did you think of Civil War?
So honestly, I'm getting some, although the movies look narratively to be completely different, I'm getting some of the worries I had watching the Men trailer, watching this Civil War trailer, where the message is the movie. Like in Men, it felt like one long dream sequence, right? Where I'm like,
yeah,
I don't feel like there's any characters here. I feel like I'm just watching one long visual metaphor that is, I can't watch that for an entire movie. This feels, the problem is if somebody told you like, hey, Matt, they're making an A24 movie about a modern day Civil War. This trailer is exactly what you would think.
Yeah.
They would be making. And there's nothing more to it. Like, does it look pretty impressive from like a craft level in terms of like visuals? And, Alex Garland is obviously a really gifted director.
Yeah. For sure.
But it just seems like the most obvious version of what you would think this movie would be. And again, it's only a trailer, so I'm hoping there's something more to it, maybe that they're not showing us. But I watched it and I go, wow, this is like maybe, in terms of sheer scope and scale, this might be the most ambitious thing he's ever done.
Yeah.
And yet the movie also seems like somehow that also results in like maybe the least interesting looking story.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's anything extra involved. Like it's no additional layers to it. It's just this might be very, I don't know how this will play. But basically the thought that I had while watching the trailer was that it reminded me a lot of, like, I don't know how into video games you are or anything, but like back in the day when the first like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, I think, came out, and like you saw like, oh my God, in that game, like Russia invades the US and like we're playing Call of Duty like in America, and that's so like we're holding down like a fast food restaurant thing, and it's like that was interesting, and it was like, oh my god, the shock of that was like, oh my god, we're on US soil in this game, it's war. That is the vibe I got from the Civil War trailer, and that's all I got from it, was that it's just unique in that this is the extrapolation of like the current political climate we're in brought to the extreme, but like to what end? Like, yeah, it's,
and
yeah.
I think in our group chat, there were two interesting things. One was Brent sent a tweet from like the Toronto film critic, Josh Lewis, who I'm a big fan of. And his tweet was simply, watch the trailer for Alex Garland's Civil War. And it seems to, and it reminds me that even though we're called the United States, yes, we're more divided than ever. And like, and you know, it's
just so great.
That really, that tells you everything.
Yes.
It was such a brilliant tweet, because it was like,
absolutely.
It's just like, yeah. And also when Nick said it looked like a little exploitative.
Absolutely.
Of like our current moment.
Yep.
I agree.
I think he said that it looks like the liberal equivalent of like the conservative, like anti-woke movies. Like,
oh, that's what I said. Yeah.
Oh, that's what you said. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I said, you know, those like, I'm sure like Daily Wire productions,
yes,
or whatever, where it's like in a future where everyone must wear masks and you can't leave your house. Like,
kids can be cats in school.
Yeah, this is like this trailer makes it look like the, you know, yeah, like the liberal, or I guess like you could just say centrist, even equivalent of that. I'm hoping there's more to the movie than that.
Me too.
But boy, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. It just felt a little exploitative and reductive, and I don't know. I want to believe in Alex Garland. So,
Same here. Yeah. It's going to be covered on Obsessive Viewer. That's my pledge. It's on the docket. We're going to review it. It'll be something. Hopefully it's good. But yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about it together.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. But having said that, once again, Civil War is opening in theaters, April 26th. Do you want to get into our feature review for the evening, Mitch?
Let's do it, man.
All right. So for the listener, obviously, if this is your first time listening, we're going to do a non-spoiler review of Poor Things, and then we'll go into a spoiler section that will be punctuated by a clip from the trailer. I have timestamps in the show notes of the episode, which you can find in your podcast app that you're listening to this on, or you can go to obsessiveviewer.com/OV407 to navigate the timestamps to avoid the spoiler section. But for right now, we're going to go into non-spoilers for Poor Things. It is opening in theaters December 22nd, which is tomorrow. If you're listening to this day of release. The plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is the incredible tale about the fantastical evolution of Bella Baxter, a young woman brought back to life by the brilliant and unorthodox scientist, Dr. Godwin Baxter. Director for this movie was Yorgos Lanthimos. Writer was Tony McNamara, based on the novel by Alistair Gray. And the cast includes Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, Mark Ruffalo, and Rami Youssef. So, Mitch, I had originally had on the docket to review Wonka this week, and then you so graciously sent me a message and was like, hey, I've been dying to talk about Poor Things. Can I please come on the show? And I'm like, thank God, yes. Because I have little to no interest in watching Wonka. So let's kick off this review by kind of talking about Yorgos Lanthimos. For me, I put in my Letterboxd review that there's something really usually off-putting to me about his style. Like, he can be interesting, he can be unique, he can be very, very out of the box, but the movies of his that I've seen just fill me with this sense of discomfort throughout it and unease, and I just don't like that feeling. It is such a weird thing for me to watch that. Like, I saw Dogtooth, and that movie is so weird, but it's like, it's weird.
Dark.
Yeah, weird and dark. And like, when I kind of got to the point, like early on, where I'm like, oh, this is a weird, like, sheltered kids sort of insulated thing. And I'm like, this is weird. And then, like, by the end, I just felt very I can't really put it into words, but I can't really articulate it, but like, I just felt uneasy. And then same thing with the killing of a sacred deer. Jesus Christ. And then The Favorite, I thought, was a lot more accessible and interesting and funny and enjoyable. And I haven't revisited it since. So how do you feel about Yorgos Lanthimos? And why am I wrong?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, everything, I don't even think Yorgos Lanthimos himself would argue with you about how those movies make you feel. And I am a big Yorgos Lanthimos fan. He has not made anything that I have not liked.
Nice.
I love Dogtooth, love The Lobster. I'm even the pretentious asshole who liked Killing of Sacred Deer. Loved The Favorite. And honestly, you know, he's a director that, oddly enough, I think as his films have become more accessible in a lot of ways. I mean, between The Favorite and this, I feel like he's actually kind of getting better almost.
Yeah.
And even though I've already loved what he is doing in the past, but he's responsible for some of my favorite movies of the past decade,
Nice.
including The Lobster and The Favorite, probably being the two ones that I really loved. I love the way that his movies play with social mores in these really fascinating ways. And I think almost all of his movies are just very, very, very dark comedies, even including Dogtooth, honestly. Yeah. And there are movies that are almost these social experiments where, you know, in the case of Dogtooth, like, what if two kids were raised like with no exposure to the outside world and their rules were total nonsense created by their parents? And The Lobster, like, what if people had to find a partner, and if they, you know, if they had this cutoff date where they couldn't find a partner, something bad would happen. And you know, you could say that to a degree. Even The Favorite, every one of his movies is a social experiment. This is kind of like the ultimate social experiment.
Yes.
Right? This movie. This is a literal experiment, right? Running amok in society. And we are seeing kind of this living experiment, Emma Stone, kind of bounce off of people and kind of confound people. And I just thought that was just such a beautiful sort of like logical endpoint to his sort of obsession with that kind of theme of like experimenting with different like social tropes and things like that.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is that next up for Yorgos Lanthimos is a Marvel movie. He's going to go into the Marvel machine.
You know what? If they gave Yorgos Lanthimos complete creative control over a superhero movie, I would.
That would be so weird. I would be there for it. It would be weird, but yeah. But Poor Things, like, unexpectedly, like, it blew me away. I was very impressed, and I never saw The Lobster. I do need to go and watch The Lobster, though, because that does seem like the kind of movie that I would be into. In terms of it, like, my understanding of it is, I feel like I would get a lot out of it in terms of the interpersonal relationship dynamics that it probably explores, in terms of like finding someone and being with someone in romantic relationships or any kind of connections made. Like, that's stuff that I eat up. In fact, like today, when you guys are listening to this, tomorrow, the new rom-com Anyone But You comes out. So that's what I'm there for. But no, I'm genuinely excited for that movie, though. I don't think it'll be good, but I just love a good rom-com. But anyway, the way that I don't know. So I always kind of feel like I'm messing up his last name, but Lanthimos's.
I think it's like, Lanthimos.
Lanthimos.
That's how I've heard it pronounced.
Okay. Yeah. Lanthimos. his exploration of just humanity, if you can just paint with that broad of a brush with it, is so unique because of his style. And here in Poor Things, I love that it is like a wider like evolution for Emma Stone's character. It is an evolution of her from literally like not like basically being a child to an adult and coming of age. And while she's doing that and she's learning all of these things about society and the way things work, like her experiences are funny in that she doesn't know how to act. She doesn't know like the social norms and everything of the day or what is acceptable or not acceptable or anything. And that's funny, but also it's like a reflection of like how like ridiculous certain things are in like day-to-day life. And it's also just a freaking beautiful movie. Like, God damn, the visuals, like this is like the least weird, but also premium weird Lanthimos on screen. If I can be completely contradictory.
I know what you mean, because as a story, it is actually oddly accessible, despite being filled with like, graphic sex and a lot of grotesque imagery. And yet on like in many ways, it's also his weirdest movie by far.
Oh yeah.
And I think when I reviewed this for Midwest Film Journal, I messaged our editor Nick, and I said, honestly, I think I could write a 1,000 word review on like 10 different aspects of this movie. Like I could have 10 different reviews that are all saying completely different things. Because it's not often you get a kind of pansexual steampunk Victorian feminist comedy, which is what Poor Things is. There's there's really nothing else like it.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a ton to dig in about this movie. I'm
absolutely
excited to talk about it.
Yes, and I'm excited to have you on for it because this is just like so many different dynamics at play. Like whether it's the paternal relationship between Willem Dafoe and Emma Stone in the movie, or if it's the duality of the kind of romantic nature of Mark Ruffalo versus Rami Youssef's relationships with her, and how those are completely different and completely approaching different, like approached at differently. Like it's more genuine for one and more predatory and manipulative for the other. And the way that like Mark Ruffalo does, I think Nick said this to me after I logged it. He was like, everything that he does in this movie is gold. Like Mark Ruffalo is just incredible in this, and I absolutely agree. Just amazing.
Yeah, and that might be a great place to start, because I think, to me, I mean, there's so many things that this, like I said, I mean, this is, I think, the only movie I gave 5 stars to this year on Letterboxd. And to me, I think the two things that really stand out, I mean, there's a lot that stands out, but are the performances from Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo, and the dialogue from Tony McNamara's screenplay, which the dialogue is also incredible and really plays also into those two performances. I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but it's been a few weeks since I first watched this movie, and I think I can confidently say that Emma Stone, I think, might give one of the best comedic performances I've ever seen in any movie. She is. I am in awe of her this year. She's also doing great work on the show The Curse with Nathan Fielder.
I haven't started that yet, but goddamn, I need to.
Amazing. But between those two shows, she's like all of a sudden like my favorite actress. Yeah. Just watching these two, and she's amazing. Playing, obviously, starting this movie as a literally, I don't know if we've mentioned the plot, but she's a grown woman with a baby's brain put inside of her by Willem Dafoe, and watching her evolution throughout from the beginning to the end of the movie, the way her dialogue advances, the way her physical movements advance, the amount of work and like thought and just how calculated of a performance that is without ever seeming overly showy or self-conscious in a way, you know, it is just genuinely hilarious. And her energy is just infectious. I was absolutely bowled over by her. And Mark Ruffalo, equally amazing, as just like this biggest pathetic sleaze bag of a lawyer you'll ever meet. You know, in some moments you want to see him get the shit kicked out of him, but other times he's too pathetic.
You just feel you pity him. I don't even say I don't even say feel bad for him. You just pity him. It's so pathetic.
Yes. He is unbelievable as well.
Absolutely. And yes, Emma Stone, my God, like just the way she just commands that role. Like even when like there is such a line that is walked with her performance in this movie, that in the early parts of the movie where she is like a person with an infant brain and she doesn't have like clear like motor skills, or she can't communicate clearly, she walks very peculiarly. Like even though she has those like attributes to her, she never comes across as it, like even though she has those attributes and she is kind of indirectly or directly targeted for manipulation and for predators who want certain things from her, she carries the role in such a way that does not make her seem like she is a victim or damsel or someone who needs to be rescued or anything. At every turn, she is making choices based on her experience. And like, even though that experience is severely limited and she has like no concept of like the dangers surrounding her and everything, she still is making those choices and doing the things that she wants to do and desires to do. And it's just such a tightrope because there is such with a much less steady hand and lack of focus in like across the board, that could have been a disaster. That could have been like a weird, like, it would have given her, I don't want to say like wouldn't have given her as much agency or anything, but basically wouldn't have given her much agency. like having her be in command of herself throughout the entire movie and then building the evolution of the character through that control that she exhibits as she gains more control and more knowledge and everything is some remarkable, like it's a remarkable blend of perfect screenwriting, perfect directing, perfect acting. Like it is everything firing on all cylinders.
Well, I love that you brought up kind of her sort of quest for control, because this movie is ultimately her quest, her character Bella, her quest for agency, right? And throughout the movie, kind of the satire that we see is there are really two defining characteristics to Bella, which is she's extremely horny, she's very sexual, and she's also really curious, right? She wants to explore the world. And the world that she has come into is a world that she is confounded by the restrictions men want to place on her sexuality and her curiosity. And we see that a character like Godwin, right? Her who she calls God, right? Her quote unquote creator. Who Willem Dafoe is amazing. His scarred,
oh my God,
scarred face.
Again, one of the things about like an element of the movie that makes me think is like pure Yorgos Lanthimos. Like I want to look away. It's I don't know. There's something about like it didn't have to go that hard, I guess.
He's a fascinating character in his own right. The more we learn about him, he goes from monstrous to monstrously sympathetic to oddly endearing by the film's end. And, but, anyways, he's a character, right? He's a male who he has been allowed to satisfy his curious appetite as much as he wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
He gets to perform all of these unholy experiments on animals and people alike
Mm-hmm.
to no consequence. In fact, he's revered as a genius, right? And whereas Mark Ruffalo's character is somebody who takes pride in his sexual conquests, right? One of the funniest lines in the movie is when him and Bella first, have sex and they're lying in bed and he goes, "You've been thrice fucked by the very best. No man will ever bring you to the rapturous heights that I just have." He's like, "But don't expect me to fall in love with you." And as soon as she exhibits any sexual agency of her own, he completely crumbles. He completely breaks. And I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but obviously that's kind of the central conflict of the movie. And Bella's sort of confusion and just complete dismissal, right, of these kind of really silly double standards that we hold for both men and women. If you're a woman who is curious and wants to have lots of sex, you are mentally ill and dangerous. And if you're a man, it's cool and
exactly you're celebrated.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the part that's the aspect of the movie that I found really just so in a way fresh, like a fresh way to kind of explore that central theme, that central concept, because it's never like I just completely lost my train of thought, but basically it's something that like that aspect of it where she is learning more and like he crumbles and everything, that is just such a perfect like takedown of like the Lothario machismo, like masculine fragility. And it is, like you said, it is just how like society is in terms of like, women are viewed this way they're viewed as promiscuous for being sexually liberated. Men are celebrated for that. And like here, it's just so perfectly contained to just expose like how ridiculous that is on a societal level by having him just crumble at the thought of her doing anything without him is like, I don't know. It's just, it's done so much more eloquently than I could put into words and have put into words in this little like 30-45 second word salad I just threw out. Yeah.
No, I mean, that was incredibly well put.
Thank you.
And I think too, what's so refreshing is to see such an outwardly like sex positive and a movie that's also just tackling these themes of like societal repression of women that is not like The fucking Handmaid's Tale or something that's like incredibly bleak and depressing to watch. And especially surprising from someone like Yorgos Lanthimos, who like absolutely could make the bleak and depressing version of this movie. He absolutely could. And he doesn't. He makes a hilarious comedic version of that, but doesn't also hold back on the nastiness and some of the more violent aspects and outrageous aspects. And also, I'm sure you probably being online on Twitter, you see so much discourse like how there's no sex in movies. Movies are so sanitized these days, which I agree. And I mean, it is kind of refreshing to see a movie that is so outright R-rated in its depiction of sex. And I found myself, this movie was just so refreshing on so many levels. To me. And just the way it tackled these themes, as well as just like depiction of them being so frank and hilarious.
Absolutely. And just kind of in the broad sense, the idea that, or like the way that it presents, like this might be like reductive or of it, but like just the way it explores like the concept of femininity in a masculine world or a masculine controlled world. Like that idea of like, yeah, I want to have sex. Oh, I can get paid to have sex. Okay. And then everyone's like, no, you're a whore. It's like, well, okay, whatever. I don't care. Like, it's just, there's so many different elements that, I don't know, the goofy, like jokey thing I'm thinking is like men walked so that poor things could run. So because it's such a more nuanced representation of some similar themes.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so fun. It's fun. Yeah.
I think you're right. And I think because of the kind of ludicrous and like fantastical tone and like imagery of the movie and just it being a comedy in general, it can be, unlike something like Men, which we talked about earlier, it can be more on the nose and like a little less subtle about its themes, because the movie isn't taking itself as seriously as something like Men, which is meant to just be this grim, punishing experience. And you know, I also just want to say the dialogue, I wrote down so many lines from the movie that were just having me double over laughing. This is the only movie this year where I watched it on my own on the screener. And I told my fiance, Devin, who I live with, I was like, you have to watch this movie. I just watched it. It is incredible. And then we literally watched it the next day. I watched it twice because I loved it so much. And Mark Ruffalo's character, who has the amazing name Duncan Wedderburn, which Bella Baxter says over and over. One of the funniest moments when they're sitting at this table and Mark Ruffalo is kind of realizing emotionally he's in so deep with Bella. It's like the more she kind of wriggles away from him, the more he is, you know, just driven crazy and feels devoted to her. There's this moment he's at a table and she gets up and she's dancing and he goes, I've become the very thing I hate, a grasping succubus of a lover. I've cried many of them off of me and now I'm it. Fuck.
Yes. That's the dialogue is so fucking good, man. It's just so good. It's beautiful. It's lyrical. It's, oh my God. Yeah. There are some things late in the movie that I want to touch on in spoilers, but what else can we say in non-spoilers? The kind of visuals of it, like it does the kind of, I guess, tried and true, or I don't know if this is just carried over from The Favorite or if he does this in his other movies, but that kind of fisheye lens aesthetic that he brings to the table is utilized quite frequently here. This movie in particular, like in The Favorite, I thought that the weird kind of camera techniques that he employed there felt, again, kind of like a light extension of that like uneasy feeling that I have with his filmmaking and style and everything. Sure. But here, like, I kind of found like it balanced a lot of the just crazy, weird world building visuals of the movie on screen. So like we see like a freaking, like, what was it? Like a dog or a chicken dog? Like what?
Yeah, it's like a bulldog with a duck's head, and then vice versa. We see the duck with the bulldog's head.
Yes. So like it's just peppered throughout at these weird, strange, very inhumane science experiments, but also just the overall feel. Like it feels like a kind of like a Terry Gilliam, like you said, like steampunk sort of aesthetic, but more importantly, like those weird camera angles, the like wide lenses, the fisheye lens things, those also kind of feel like they are existing as an enhancement of the peculiar movements that Emma Stone is doing in each scene. Because like she's literally like she's walking like she just learned how to walk yesterday, because she just learned how to walk yesterday, basically. And I just felt like that just enhanced the overall mood of the movie, and it made it a lot more immersive for me, rather than in his previous work where I would be like, oh, this is making me uncomfortable, like just, you know, like it's like the Family Guy bit, like what, that someone throw a pie.
yeah, sure. I think too, the favorite, which I adore, and I'm just so on board with his style that this didn't bother me as much. But in that movie, the fisheye lenses did feel a little just like, okay, I don't feel like this adds much to the story, except it's almost just like Yorgos putting his like odd stamp on, a rather conventional narrative, which I love that stamp. So I was cool with it. But here I feel like those fisheye lenses, those like, I love when they're outside, like all the skies have this like cotton candy look to them, and there's like odd blimps in the sky. There's like I said, there's that steampunk aesthetic where it's like futuristic meets like Victorian era. And I felt like in this case, like not only were they just made the movie gorgeous to look at, but on a narrative level, it really also communicates like the feeling of that Bella must experience of waking up in, seeing the world for the first time. And the sensory overload that must come with exploring and like leaving this house you've kind of been sequestered to for the beginning of your life. Yep. So I not only did I think it just added an awesome visual, palette to the movie, but I also thought it served like a pretty distinct purpose, which was cool.
Absolutely. And the switch from like black and white to color film, like it's that perfect way to also express that overstimulating that she experienced getting out into the world. And it's just, it's freaking gorgeous, man. It's gorgeous. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like we should go into spoilers here in a sec, but I wanted to ask you, did you see the movie Fingernails on Apple TV Plus?
I did not. Is that, it's the movie with Riz Ahmed and Jesse Buckley?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So I watched it, and it had some of that uneasy stuff for me. But what I found interesting when I was kind of digging into it was that the director, Christos Nico, was like, he was like a second unit director on one or two, or assistant director on Dogtooth, and I think maybe another Lanthimos movie, but like throughout, like before I found that, I kept thinking like, man, this seems like he's like trying to be Yorgos Lanthimos, like in that uneasy, like weird, heightened way, but not fully committing to it. So I don't know. And I was delighted to see like, oh, it's because he's worked with him before. Like he was his assistant director. But I don't know. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that if you ever get around to it.
Yeah, they're both Greek directors. So yeah, I would be very curious. But yeah, to me, I could not have been more pleased that, one of my favorite working directors, it's been like, I think maybe 5 years since his last movie.
Has it been 5 years?
I think the favorite was like 2018, right?
Jesus.
And I know it doesn't seem like that long, but the fact that 2018 was 5 years ago is
that's insane. Yeah.
But so the fact that it was such a long way, and I'm like, this might be my favorite Yorgos Lanthimos movie.
Nice.
Period. So was just so satisfying that this ended up being my favorite film of the year. So yeah.
Nice. Is there anything that like you say favorite movie of the year, but Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire.
Yeah. We're living in a pre-Rebel Moon world right
exactly.
now. So everything's gonna change.
Yes,
obviously. So,
exactly.
Talk to me in a week, and we'll see how I feel.
Exactly. So let's go into spoilers for Poor Things. Like I said, it's opening in theaters December 22nd. We're going to go into spoilers for Poor Things. If you want to avoid the spoilers, check the show notes for timestamps. But to bring us into spoilers, I'm going to play a clip from the trailer for Poor Things.
No. She's an experiment.
Good evening.
Her brain and her body are not quite synchronized. But she's progressing at an accelerated pace.
So spoilers on for Poor Things. The music in this movie was gorgeous, absolutely stunning. I just from the trailer, I just like that thought. It's stunning.
Oh yeah. I mean, I felt like when we nominated this for the Film Critics Circle Awards, Nick was like, "Oh, we left out cinematography." But I was like, "Yeah, nominated for every category that it's possibly eligible for."
Oh yeah.
Movie, I just felt like
the synchronicity of it. Absolutely, the synchronicity of every aspect of it is just it's insane. I loved it. But in spoilers, one of the things that I ultimately was not displeased with, but in the moment I was a little nervous about, was the Christopher Abbott, I believe, when he pops up as her previous iterations, like husband, and then the movie veers off into her choosing to go with him and being with him and seeing like how her life was. Like, I love that as an idea. I love that as like she is still exhibiting her agency and like use it like she's making the choice. She's not beholden to anyone yet or anything, or she's not someone who is going to be like property to someone else, but she's also very curious about who she was and who, like, what her life is like, and she wants to explore that. But like when it goes to her being with him, I just felt like the movie veered off into like a completely different movie for a beat. But I'm glad that it didn't stay in there that long, and it had enough tension and enough turns to make me kind of get back into it. So how did you feel about that aspect of the movie?
Yeah, well, I guess we're in spoilers now, so I will say that that is where the movie started to feel like the old Yorgos Lanthimos, where all of a sudden there's like the threat of genital mutilation, and murder. Like, this woman's like basically being imprisoned. I mean, literally being imprisoned in this house. By this like sadistic person, and the fact that they had Christopher Abbott playing him, the second he shows up, you're like, this guy's gonna be evil.
Yeah, absolutely.
This guy is absolutely gonna be evil. And that humor, for example, like the dinner scene where he goes, "Oh, we used to have a love of fun," and then they, he humiliates his servant.
Yes,
what they like to do. That felt very much like Dogtooth, Lobster era Yorgos Lanthimos, which I'm a big fan of that. So I kind of appreciated that shift into the much darker tone near the end. Now, I was worried because I fell in love with the character of Bella Baxter.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
In this situation, I'm like, she is, one of the most, for me, like, just one of the most unforgettable protagonists in the past few years. So when she was, in danger, I guess it showed how great of a job the movie did in investing me in her, that I was genuinely tense and worried that something was going to happen to her. And with a director like Yorgos, you wouldn't be surprised if he ended it on a really bleak note. Right. So when things finally come full circle, and like the ultimate fate of Christopher Abbott's character is revealed,
beautiful. It
was perfect.
Yes. Like it's such a, it is, I don't know. It's such a like perfect, like, fuck the patriarchy sort of ending, but it's so like,
you're just like kind of carrying on her own curiosity, like the potentially shady legacy of like Godwin Baxter.
She's getting into the family business.
Exactly. It's just fitting on every level, and it's also just a delicious comeuppance for a truly reprehensible character.
And and maybe I didn't track it right. I was thinking, and I don't know if this was the expectation that like we were meant to think it was going to go this way, but I was thinking like, oh, okay, she's going to basically do with Godwin what Godwin did with her. She's going to use his brain into Christopher Abbott's body so that he can live or whatever. But no, it's not that at all. I don't know. It's not that happy ending, but it is a happy ending in its own twisted Yorgos Lanthimos way.
Yes. I think almost that would have been too good of a fate for Christopher Abbott's character. And I'm glad you brought up Godwin too, because I love the arc of the emotional arc of, it's not that his character changes, but like the way our view of his character changes throughout the movie. I mean, he does some really sketchy things, and he's a complicated person. He's not necessarily a good person, right? But when we first meet him, he seems pretty horrible. And we learn about these experiments that his father performed on him.
Yes.
Which were included like chemical castration and like removing of his like glands, which also just what an amazing touch of when he's eating at dinner. And
oh my God, the bubbles. Yes. It's just it's so weird. It's so weird, but it works because the world that it's in, it's so unique.
It's like, that's like to me, that was like one of the first indicators of like, I'm like, oh, when we first see that bubble thing when he's eating dinner and she claps after, seeing it pop, that was the first time I'm like, oh, this movie's going to be like wacky.
Yes.
And, but the way it changes, to, he's then kind of sympathetic. You see, he's the victim of all these like cruelties at the hand of his father. But then ultimately, like, as we actually see his genuine love for Bella by the end of the movie, I think a lesser movie, a less interesting one, would have him, pursuing her or angry that she's leaving. And when she first announces she wants to leave with Duncan Wedderburn, he goes, well, she can do what she wants. He realizes that he's created somebody with, a higher intellect and desires and wants. And he's like, okay, once I've realized they've reached that level, like I have to respect their wishes.
Right.
And by the end of the movie, like his love for her and wanting to like walk her down the aisle in her wedding, I was like, I can't believe how touching.
That was so touching. Yeah. That is just the complexities of that paternal figure. And it's just so weird that like Nick had messaged me again after I had said it, where he said that like I agree with this. He said, let me bring it up here. He said, the moment in Poor Things when Willem Dafoe gives the long explanation about his genitals, and Rami Youssef says, what? And he just replies with, I'm a eunuch and can't fuck her. Just like the directness of that is just so amazing. But also like that paternal familial connection that he has with her. And then also like the kind of darkness or tragic nature of the way that like the next experiment that he has with, is it Margaret Qualley? Where he's like he's shielding himself from forming that connection again. And it's going to disastrous results. Yeah, but also the Max character, Rami Youssef, like that, like the character arc for him is like in a lesser movie or a less like refined movie, it would have been too much of a like placeholder or basically an archetype of like, okay, well, like the not all men sort of ethos, I guess. But like him being like, yeah, I just care about you. I love you and everything. And then like he's still like waits for it. Like there's a genuine like affection there. But also he has his frustrations and everything. So I don't know. How did you feel about his character?
Yeah, I mean, he was great. I think he's probably the least of the Mark Ruffalo, the Godwin Baxter, Bella, obviously. He probably is given the least to do, but he obviously serves like he serves a great purpose in the movie in terms of like servicing like Bella's character and allowing her to kind of reach a point where she is deciding to be in a relationship because she wants to be.
Yes.
And she's finding the acceptance that she wants by the end. And I also love that in with his character. He's not just some like knight in shining armor who's ready to rescue her. Like, he's childish at times. He's deceitful at times. He's dishonest at times, but he's also ultimately like a pretty humble and caring person too. And so, I mean, even a character like that is, in this movie is given complexity. And I think that's just why, again, what makes this just such a remarkable film is the way it nails a lot of the touching human drama in a way that almost, as good as any movie you care to name this year, but also nails like the absurdist slapstick ridiculousness as well. And those are such hard things to balance in any movie, and this movie makes it just seem effortless.
Absolutely. And him, Max, he's like he's about as grounded and like regular person that you can be in this world that is in this movie. But also, like you touched on it, I love that the movie isn't positioning itself as like, oh, he's waiting for her, or he is the one, it's not his choice to accept her with her new history and everything, or for him to be upset with her over her actions. Instead, the movie is positioned as her becoming her own person and becoming someone who is in a place where she is ready to accept a like marriage and love with this man, rather than have it be assigned to her by her father or by society. And I just love that. And when you kind of like look at the movie structurally, like it kind of just like toward the end of it, there's like that whole wedding scene, and then like the bride leaving at the altar. That is like such a conventional like romantic drama, romantic comedy set piece, but it's done with such a with such a Yorgos Lanthimos at the head of it. So I love that. I think that was just really well done. And I think it's great for the movie overall.
Yeah, I mean, I could rave about this movie for hours. I'm just so impressed with Yorgos Lanthimos, who's typically a pretty misanthropic and like borderline like nihilistic director. Like even his films that are very dark comedies, the messaging is often very bleak. It has a pretty low view on, like you could argue has a pretty like low view on humanity. There's very few like characters in his movies. You're either at best, in the world of movies like Dogtooth and The Lobster, you're at best you're too stupid to be evil, and at worst you're completely corrupt and making the world a worse place. And in a movie like this, it's so great, to see that Yorgos has kind of like shed a lot of that. Not that he needed to, but he has this sunnier disposition in a movie like Poor Things, and it totally works. I'm so impressed, and I'm like, it just makes me so curious, like what he will do after this.
Same here. And like that, I think you kind of pinpointed exactly what it is about his work that is so off-putting to me, is that misanthropic viewpoint, that very, very bleak view of things. Cause like, I still think about like one of the last scenes of Dogtooth, like here, 5 years after I'd seen it for the first time. And it's like, it's just so depressing and dour and sad, because of like you said, you're either too like sometimes his characters are just too stupid to survive. They're a character who is, and I'm kind of basically just speaking specifically about Dogtooth, they're a character who is not given the tools necessary to like not even thrive, to exist in like normal society. And like that is such a bleak and depressing thing about Dogtooth. And here we have like the inverse of that, someone who doesn't have like the tools necessary or doesn't have the knowledge, but goes out and seeks it and builds and learns and and becomes like, grows into like a person who is able to take control of situations rather than be completely destroyed by them. And I think that is just such a fresh thing from what I've seen of Lanthimos's work. That is such a fresh and uplifting uplifting tone for him to have in this movie. And it makes me excited to see what he does next as well. If he's going to carry on with that, or if he's going to go back to super dark, crazy, bleak stuff.
Yeah, I mean, after The Favorite, and now being more comedic, and now this being much more comedic, it seems he's heading in that direction. And I mean, honestly, between those two movies, like, I hope him and Emma Stone just literally are like,
oh my God, yes,
Scorsese.
Yes, yes,
like each other's work. Because I would just love to see them continue to collaborate with one another. Because
same here,
they are incredible. When they work together.
Absolutely. And kind of the final thing I want to kind of talk about was God, I can't remember the character's name, but what did you make of, was it Gerard Carmichael? Yeah, Gerard Carmichael, Harry Astley. He has a run in the movie where he was introducing Bella to the more bleak stuff. Like, what did you make of his character?
Yeah, I mean, nothing in this movie didn't work for me, but like, this is like the one thing in the movie where I could see somebody maybe, I could see somebody maybe like taking an issue with, in terms of like, he seems to serve like a much more thematic purpose than like a real narrative one.
Yeah.
That said, it's like, he's kind of he's almost the character who's like there to, because he's there like literally functioning as the thing, like, I am going to explicitly challenge your optimistic worldview. You have this like inherent optimism and this zest for life, right? Which is that her zest for life is so infectious, and what makes this movie so fun. But it worked for me because I loved it, because ultimately she, like, Bella was going to have to encounter some kind of harsh cruelty of life, right? Like, something was going to happen that would expose her to the more ugly side of humanity. And what I loved is that ultimately, like, the movie's message regarding like that character's arc, I think, where Gerard Carmichael just goes, hey, look at this, people who are starving and dying and have a terrible life, and things like this. And he's like, and there's nothing you can do to help them. Like, the issue is too large for you to solve.
And her reaction is to just take all of Mark Ruffalo's money. And I love the button of like the naivete of her just giving it, like willfully giving it to those guys who are not going to give it to them.
No.
It's beautiful.
How casually she tells Duncan, she's like, I told you I gave all your money to the nice man at the ship. Like, and he's just so angry.
It's so great. Great.
But, the movie, again, it's like this shockingly but refreshingly positive outlook from Yorgos Lanthimos, where like his worldview ultimately is bested or is trumped by Bella's, when in a really, I thought, wonderful moment when Gerard Carmichael goes up to Bella and is like, hey, I apologize for upsetting you. And she was like, it's okay, like, you needed to show me that. And he goes, I really didn't. I was angry. It made me mad to see somebody so naively happy, and I felt like I needed to destroy it, which is honestly, like, that is a relatable human feeling that everybody has felt at some point in their life.
Absolutely.
Right? You are unhappy and you see somebody else having something, enjoying something that you feel like you deserve. Everybody has that kind of jealousy, right? We've all felt jealous over those kind of things. And I love how Bella goes, well, I think you're just a really hurt and scared person. And he was like, and he goes, you're probably right. Yeah. Or he goes, that might be true.
So great.
And I just thought that was so beautiful that the movie essentially very explicitly kind of says, like, people who choose to kind of dwell on these horrible negative things are doing so because like they're coming from a place of hurt inside, and ultimately that can't really lead to much good. That will make you an unhappy person.
Absolutely. When you this is such a dumb joke, but when you said that, like, we've all experienced this like feeling of jealousy if like we're in a bad mood and we see someone who has it good, like we'll feel jealous and everything. Like my dumbass thought was like, yeah, that same thing kind of happened with my friend John Doe and this Detective Mills. Yeah.
That's right. He coveted what he had, and he took action.
He did.
He did
real go-getter there, John Doe. But yeah, any other thoughts on Poor Things? I know that we can probably talk a while more about it, but man, I it's not going to make the top of my top 10. I will say that, but it's going to be very high up there for me. And it's such a unique movie. I loved it. I really loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. As did I. It seemed right up my alley, and it was even more up my alley than I thought it would be.
Yep.
So happy to see that.
Nice. All right. Well, that is our review of Poor Things. Check out Mitch's review. I have a link in the show notes. Now, Mitch, why don't we go ahead and drain the bathwater of this episode and go into our review of Saltburn.
Love that metaphor.
Yes.
Let's do it.
So our secondary review of the night is going to be for Saltburn. Probably won't do a spoiler section. If we do, I'll make sure to note it in the show notes because it is a movie that we can spoil because I had some problems with it. But to bring us into it, I'll go ahead and read the plot summary. Saltburn is about a student at Oxford University finds himself drawn into the world of a charming and aristocratic classmate who invites him to his eccentric family's sprawling estate for a summer never to be forgotten. The movie was written and directed by Emerald Fennell, who previously in 2020 made Promising Young Woman, which was a movie that I really enjoyed.
Same.
Nice. The cast includes Barry Keoghan of previous Yorgos Lanthimos movie, Killing of the Sacred Deer, Jacob Elordi, Archie Madekwe, Rosamund Pike, and Richard E. Grant. And once again, this movie is going to be streaming on Amazon Prime beginning tomorrow, if you're listening to this on the 21st, so December 22nd. Mitch, in non-spoilers, in non-spoilers, what did you think of Saltburn? And I just decided we are going to do a spoiler section so I can play the clip from the trailer at that point.
Sure.
Yeah, what did you think of Saltburn?
I was pretty disappointed by this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed Promising Young Women, and the thing is, there's something about Emerald Fennell, and this would be a longer discussion for a different time, but I'll just say that people seem to have their knives out for Emerald Fennell on the online, film Twitter community. People hated Promising Young Woman. There was a massive backlash to that film.
Yeah.
And there seems to be an equally strong and vitriolic backlash to Saltburn. But going into Saltburn, I had every reason to think I would enjoy it because the trailer made the film look visually very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Barry Keoghan is an actor I really enjoy in a lot of roles. And, I just thought like, hey, a lot of people didn't like Promising Young Woman. I love that. I'll probably really enjoy this. I heard some comparisons to like Talented Mr. Ripley, one of my favorite films of all time. So
blind spot for me, honestly.
Oh,
I know,
dude. You want the better version of Saltburn? Watch Talented Mr. Ripley. Will blow your mind.
Will do.
So I thought this film was visually pretty, visually pretty gorgeous. I thought Barry Keoghan gave a pretty solid performance. Loved some of the supporting performances, especially Carey Mulligan as well. I thought was hilarious. Ultimately, this film felt like it was building up, and we can get to this in spoilers, to a pretty dramatic conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And where the movie ultimately, how the movie ultimately resolved itself and the big reveal of what this was all leading to, I found incredibly rushed, unconvincing.
Yes.
And pretty disappointing and shockingly conventional in a way I had seen that before. And the movie has some, you mentioned bathwater earlier.
Yeah.
The movie has some rather shocking and like transgressive, quote unquote, shocking and transgressive moments, a lot of bodily fluids in this movie.
Yes. Yeah.
And I found them to be very like empty provocations. It felt like Emerald Fennell was like, this would be fucked up. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but the movie's tone seems very like self-satisfied in a way that I could kind of get I think the backlash is still really harsh. I don't think it's like the worst movie I've seen all year or anything, but I can sort of see why people are maybe a little more prone to disliking this movie and being harsh towards it, because there is kind of a smug and self-satisfied tone to this movie.
Yes.
That did rub me the wrong way a bit. So,
same.
So for I didn't find it very thrilling, didn't find it very menacing, didn't find it all that funny as a black comedy either. So yeah, I was disappointed. What did you think?
I will echo a lot of those same sentiments. Like, as someone who loved Promising Young Woman and thought that, I'm not going to spoil Promising Young Woman, but one of the most like audacious endings that I'd seen that year, that the way that movie concludes its story, I felt was so interesting and so like ballsy for the story that she was telling, and also a little bit like nihilistic and crazy, even though it kind of it's a whole thing. But anyway, the way that concluded, I was all for it. I loved that movie mostly for a lot of that reason. So to go from that to Saltburn, where it never seems like she's trying to one-up what she did with Promising Young Woman, but it feels like she's trying, like you said, trying to get to a foregone conclusion for the story in a self-satisfied kind of like it, like the entire reveal at the end that we'll talk about in spoilers feels incredibly unearned. I don't get any sense of why this person is doing these things, why, like, what the motivation is aside from surface level things, unless I missed something because I watched this like very quickly after work. But it just felt just so directionless. Like Promising Young Woman had a very specific like thematic thing that it was going for, and the journey that she was going for was very clear. This just felt like it was trying to pull the rug out from under us, but it was a hardwood floor from the beginning. Like, it just felt like it felt just so purposeless. And the kind of the big theme of the movie by the end of it that I'll kind of express more about in spoilers felt more like something that would have been more at home in like 2016. Like, now it just seems like a tired commentary, a tired dynamic, I guess, between like fish out of water aspects and class struggles. It just felt just so it just felt so unrefined, and it did not have any it did not carry with it any like meat to it. And I just and in the provocative nature of some of the bodily fluid stuff, if you had told me, like, say a year ago, that, oh yeah, I'm going to be reviewing a Yorgos Lanthimos movie and an Emerald Fennell movie. And one of those movies is going to make me feel so uneasy and creeped out and just unnerved, like in a way that isn't going to be anything worthwhile for me in the overall movie. And the other is going to be this really interesting study of a like feminist study in this very unique world, an interesting spin on it. Like I would have laughed in your face if you told me which movie would be which, because what the hell?
I completely agree. And, you mentioned that you found the movie pretty unnerving, but like in an off-putting way. Mm-hmm. I wish I even felt that about it. I mostly found the movie pretty listless and meandering. And, I wanted to shout out I wrote a review on Letterboxd, just a 1-sentence review. That basically I said, I love the vibes and nude Keegan dancing, but for a purported psychosexual thriller about a sociopath, there's very little menace or tension here. And one of my online acquaintances, Dan McCoy, who he actually runs the Flophouse podcast. If you're familiar with that. And he commented on my review and said he thinks the movie is less interested in being a thriller and more of a cruel / horny black comedy. And on that regard, I actually think he's like right. I'm like, you're right. The movie really kind of, without any spoilers, decides to be a thriller later in the movie. Yeah. It seems like it's headed in that way, but I honestly just did not find the comedy very compelling. No. I found it mostly pretty obvious and listless. And I just think like the only thing that really impressed me about this movie was the very gauzy and like, to use an overused term, like dreamlike visuals. I loved kind of the ethereal film stock kind of look to this movie. I thought was really striking, and that always at least kept me somewhat engaged. That and Barry Keoghan's performance. But it's hard. This is a hard movie to talk about by issues with it. Without
spoiling it. With regard to like me feeling uneasy for it, like uneasy about it and stuff, like specifically and again, we'll go in spoilers here soon, but the bodily fluid aspects of it, the unease I felt was kind of exacerbated by the fact that I feel like there was no purpose for that. Like there was no reason that, like, I don't get why not, it's not like such a surface level thing as like, oh, why did he do this? Or why is that? Like, no, but I don't know what point the movie is making. And like, that's what was frustrating to me is when shit kind of starts hitting the fan and things start happening late in the movie and we start running toward that very foregone conclusion of an ending, I just felt like I don't know why this movie is why these events are happening in this movie. And it's not like a sense of, oh, why is this suddenly happening? It's more like, what the fuck is this movie saying? Like, what am I supposed to glean from this? It's a 180 in certain respects, and it's just like I'm not tethered to the story at all. Like it just felt very unfulfilling to me.
Could not agree more.
Yeah. Shall we agree more in spoilers?
Yes. I'm like, I really want to say I want to get into the details of the last, 10 minutes of the movie.
Absolutely. So we're going to go into spoilers for Saltburn. Once again, it's going to be streaming on Amazon Prime by the time you're listening to this, probably. So I'm going to play a clip from the trailer for Saltburn, and when we come back, we're going to be spoiling the film.
Oliver, I love you. I love you. All right, cheers, Ollie.
My parents, they've got problems.
What do you mean problems?
I don't think I'll ever go home again.
Well, why don't you come home with me? Come to Saltburn.
Mr. Quick.
Wow.
And here he is now.
Oh, beautiful eyes. Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, I told you it wasn't a minger.
Oh, but darling, you're kind about everyone. You can't be trusted.
And that specific part in the trailer is one of the biggest issues and biggest failings I found in the movie, is that it is trying to position Felix as this duplicitous or this manipulative person who's trying to is creating is going overboard with trying to position us to think that Felix is like using Oliver as some kind of plaything, solely for the fact that at the end of the movie it's like, oh, he was playing everyone, he had his own ulterior motives, he had his own psychotic tendencies and stuff. Isn't that crazy? It's like, no, we could see that coming a mile away. Like, it's not what purpose? Yeah.
For me, I felt similarly, but like with the caveat of like, I felt like the way, the movie is building it up, right? Again, this is super talented Mr. Ripley. I won't give you spoilers for that movie though, but in terms of him saying, did I love him at the beginning? He goes, oh, I didn't love him, but blah, blah. So my immediate, I feel like very early on, you're like, he killed him, right?
Yeah.
Like, he killed this guy. Like, he's talking about him in the past tense. He's creepy. He killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned out to be true.
Yeah.
I didn't see the whole, oh, I'm doing this incredible long con of killing off everybody to siphon this inheritance for myself, trust money for myself, so I can have the whole estate. I don't think narratively that's necessarily like a terrible direction for the movie to go, but the movie decides, rather than letting us, the audience, in on it the whole time, which I think I would have actually found more satisfying if if there's suspense because we're like, oh, is he going to be able to do this? Oh my gosh. Like, and now we're like viewing this through the eyes of a sociopath. The movie decides to play it all in this, here's what really happened kind of flashback. And A, it's like, we get the idea. And B, they're trying to play it as this big reveal, like you mentioned, and it seemed pretty obvious from the beginning something sinister was going to happen. I will say that the dance to murder on the dance floor, I will admit, like, I was like, as a sequence, I'm like, that's pretty.
That was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was a cool ending. And it was cool that he's now, we're seeing him now. He's free to just do nothing, right? In this giant mansion. But I just never really found him. I also never found Barry Keoghan's character to like, I just don't buy it. Like that he's an absolute genius mastermind. Like at the end of the film, I felt like it was stupid. Also, it doesn't gel with the same guy who humps his grave.
Oh my God. What the fuck? Like, I was just like, that felt like it was, I could not understand the rationale. Like, what is the movie saying with that? What the, like, what?
So up its own ass.
Yes.
That sequence. And it also, it's like, I couldn't square away that this, like, sad, desperately horny dude is also this, like, who would do that is also the master manipulator. It felt like the movie just sort of had a vague idea of his character, and from scene to scene, he was somebody different entirely.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just, it really didn't work for me. And also in terms of like when Jacob Elordi's character, learns about, and I'm sorry, what is Jacob Barry Keoghan's character's name again?
Oliver.
So when he learns that Oliver has been lying this entire time and is actually from like a pretty well-to-do, like upper middle class family.
Yeah.
I was sort of like, so that's a huge oversight.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
He didn't have any sort of he never thought that through, that like maybe somebody would learn about where he comes from, which is within like quick driving distance of this Saltburn mansion. So that felt weird to me as well.
Yeah. And to your point about how the movie could have functioned better if we were with Barry Keoghan's whole thing from the beginning, if we were in on that, I feel like Emerald Fennell kind of shot herself in the foot with that, because that's kind of what she did with Promising Young Woman. We were with her throughout the entire thing, and that's why that ending works so well. And so for her to do that again with this, by following the central character from like inception of the idea to execution of it, I feel like that would have been, I feel like she was trying to go a different route with that. And as a result, like you said, we don't have any sense of where Oliver is in his head, because he is deceiving this family, and the movie is deceiving us haphazardly and trying to throw up these very lazy roadblocks or red herrings with Felix potentially being untrustworthy or playing him, and then all the stuff with Farley, I think. Like that all just felt very superfluous to everything. But I think it's a very big missed opportunity that, like, yeah, they have the whole excursion to Oliver's house and they meet his family and it's his birthday and all of these things. Why not really position us and position the movie? Like, why not make that a pivot to showing exactly how that affected Felix, and showing Felix, like using that as a platform to show Felix actually caring about Oliver as a person and as a friend, and showing us that, oh yeah, Felix isn't like this distrustful person. He's just kind of a genuine dude. He kind of likes this guy. Why not have that explored more instead of just being like, oh yeah, well, he took him to his parents. He's upset that he was lied to, and oh, he's dead. And it just felt very, very sloppy.
It was very sloppy, and and honestly, like the movie overall, I thought was perfectly whatever when I was watching it. I was disappointed in it. It never enraged me, or I was never like, that was horrible when it was over, because I think the movie, like I mentioned, is very glossy aesthetically and very pleasing to look at. Mm-hmm. And there's enough there. There's enough of an air of mystery and intrigue during it that keeps you kind of invested. You're like wanting to see how things play out. Yeah. But I also think, kind of similar to what you said, it's like when you build your movie around like, what is the reveal going to be? Yeah. You know, the whole movie is building itself up as like, we're going to reveal something to you and it's going to explain everything and it's probably going to be pretty messed up. It kind of lives and dies on how you present that reveal and what it is. And you're right. It just felt sloppy. Yeah. And very hasty and perfunctory and obvious. And
like you said, very rushed. Like in that final reveal where we see like he's talking to Rosamund Pike on her deathbed, basically under like on a ventilator and everything. I like in that moment I was like, oh, that's pretty crazy. Would have been interesting if they didn't rush like everything in the last 5 minutes to get us to that point. Like it makes it like, not that it's something that you need to guess at throughout the movie, but it just feels like it's just trying to reach that conclusion, and like it's seeded, maybe not even seeded all that much, but it's a little bit kind of, I guess, hinted at when he sort of hits on her by saying like, oh yeah, you're so fucking beautiful. And then like, I'm like, okay, well, is the whole thing going to be like him trying to bang Felix's mom? Okay. But then when that reveal happens, I'm like, okay, like that's the only part we have where he has like really any, I don't know. I don't know. It was just so sloppy. And then like, I'm still playing catch up in that moment with like, oh, the dad died and he's like hanging out with her. It's all weird. I didn't like it.
Yeah, there's, Yeah, and I think there's like something mildly interesting about him maybe like trying to seduce anybody he can. This sort of like I don't know if you've ever seen this like 1960s movie with Terrence Stamp called Theorem. It was directed by this guy Pierre Pasolini, who also made Salo or Salo. Have you ever heard of that film?
Oh, I've heard about that. Yeah.
yeah. So this guy also made that.
Okay.
This guy also made a film called Theorem with Terrence Stamp, which is also incredibly similar, where this stranger comes to this bourgeoisie family and he like seduces like the father, the mother, like that, like he like seduces everybody one by one. And it's kind of a side note. It seemed like perhaps Emerald Fennell had seen that film as well.
Yeah.
And this felt like a mashup of that and Talented Mr. Ripley, and unfortunately is not nearly as good as either of those movies and has much less to say on its subjects. I guess it's not like Saltburn has nothing to say.
Right.
It's just what it has to say is very surface level.
Yes. Very watered down by ejaculation-filled bathwater. I don't understand like that in the period blood thing, like just like, yeah, I don't understand what is it like in the moment, I guess, is it supposed to be an obsession and dominance thing? And then at the end, it's just like, oh, it's just because he's a fucking psychopath, I guess, or I don't know. It's ugh.
The problem is you're talking to somebody who like I am by no means, I don't think, a prude when it comes to what I see in movies. And that being in a movie is totally fine if that's what you want to put in your movie.
Yeah.
The problem is that I think if you're going to show me that kind of imagery, I want it doesn't feel impactful if it feels like there's nothing to say. It feels very
exactly.
I keep saying the word empty over and over and over, and I think and that's just how those scenes felt to me. I was like, sure, that's shocking. Of course, watching somebody slurp up cummy bathwater is going to get a reaction out of me, of course. But I'm like not compelled by what you're trying to say
exactly
here, right? It's you're trying to, it's like you're almost trying to like take every little last drop you can of this rich person's essence, right? It's kind of the incredibly obvious visual metaphor there, and it's like, okay, I guess you wanted to tell that visual metaphor in like a really silly, gross way that sort of doesn't make sense on a story.
It did not work for me. And like, and to be frank, like I'm not a prude. I wasn't disgusted by it or anything, any of those scenes. I just didn't understand the point. I don't think there was a point, and that is what was frustrating for me about it. Just that it just served no purpose other than to be provocative and be just shocking to the audience. Because by the conceit of the movie, it is not disclosing to us where he's at in his head. It's presenting something that maybe the bathwater thing is an extension of his obsession with him or like crazy love for him. But then he also says at the beginning of the movie, I wasn't in love with him. It's just, and then by the end of it, like it being presumably all a ploy to get Saltburn or to just eradicate this family so that he could take their wealth and everything. Like I said, that is like, that's stuff that we saw like multiple times in different regards in like 2016, like Ready or Not, oh my God, Knives Out, like those kind of like eat the rich and like that class dynamic is stuff that is well-trodden territory and well-trodden in unique ways. And then this just feels like it is coming like half a decade or more too late to the party. Yeah,
the Eat the Rich movies are everywhere, right? They've even seeped into superhero movies with like Joker and the Batman and stuff like that. You know, it's like where it's like those are kind of inescapable, and this just you're already beating a dead horse. So it's like at this point, if you're going to show me that, like, give me something exciting and new. And I just this didn't do it for me. I really wanted to love it. But unfortunately, I think I do have to join the naysayers.
The consensus, Better luck next time to Emerald Fennell. I know that she's got it in her. Like, Promising Young Woman was great. I really liked that movie. So, I don't know.
Oh, I'm totally on board for the next. Like, this didn't like. Yeah, like I'm totally on board for whatever she wants to do next. I'll be excited for it. There's a lot. There are a lot of praiseworthy elements to this movie. Yeah. They just, I think, sink under the weight of their own pretension.
Exactly. There are some good elements, but those are the first to go down the drain when the stopper is pulled up. To bring about another bathwater metaphor, I could go the route of doing a lot of period blood jokes, but I want to keep it, relatively.
This is a family podcast.
I have a cat next to me, for God's sakes. So I think that'll do it for our review of Saltburn. I keep wanting to say saltwater. Saltburn. Overall thoughts, I didn't like it. Mitch, you didn't like it either. I am gonna rate it 2.5 stars out of 5. What did you end up rating it?
I also gave it 2.5 out of 5.
Nice. Once again, that is on Amazon Prime starting tomorrow if you're listening to this day of release. I have taken up a lot of your evening, so I don't think we're going to do a potpourri section unless you have something passionate you want to bring up a potpourri, but if not, we can just close out the episode now. It's totally up to you.
I don't have a ton for potpourri, so I'm okay either way.
Okay, nice. We'll forego potpourri, but why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners where they can find you online and find all your work and in your social security number and everything. Where is your Saltburn estate?
So I'm still working my way up to the Saltburn, estate. I have a few more family members to knock off before that happens, but you can find more of my work on Midwest Film Journal. Like I said, I have a review of American Fiction dropping next week, as well as I'm maybe going to try to squeeze in a top 10 piece. I didn't do one last year, want to do one this year. Unfortunately, the week that I would do it probably be the last week of December. That's also the week before I leave for Hawaii to get married. So,
oh God, that's awesome! A Hawaii wedding, nice, very nice.
I know, doing it big, but so like we'll just see. That could be an insane week for me where I get nothing done.
I could definitely see that. Yeah,
yeah. You may see a top 10 piece pop up there. Either way, though, but
nice.
And you can find me on Letterboxd at wounded_kite.
Nice. What's the origin of that username, by the way? I've always wanted to ask.
You know what? Nobody's ever asked me that before, but nice. I'll ask you now. I say that sincerely. So that used to be my AOL Instant Messenger screen name in 8th grade. I think 8th grade I was still using AOL Instant Messenger. It was a song by there's a song by the band Pavement. They're like a 90s kind of slacker rock band. And they have a song called Trigger Cut, Wounded Kite at 17 is the name of the song.
Okay.
And, when I was like 13 or 14 or whatever, I was making a screen name and I said Wounded Kite. And I just sort of kept it because it always confused people.
Nice.
And, ever since Wounded Kite. So here it is on record, the origin of Wounded Kite.
Awesome. That is, and
which was more interesting, but not really.
Well, no, here's the thing. We have now sufficiently given more backstory to you than Emerald Fennell gave to Oliver in Saltburn.
That's right.
So there we go.
Dark motivations. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Mitch, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of The Obsessive Viewer. Once again, you can find him on Letterboxd wounded_kite. And I'll put links to all of that in the show notes as well. And also, once again, Mitch, thank you for giving me an excuse not to see Wonka. So
happy to help.
Very glad for that. Yeah. So yeah, once again, Patreon, I have a IFJ winners rundown episode that's was posted this past Monday when you're listening to this. And then when you're listening to this on December 21st, tomorrow, I will have my essay for the Hold On to Your Butts Samuel L. Jackson essay series on Midwest Film Journal. I'm going to be writing about Unbreakable, so that is to come tomorrow if you're listening to this. Yeah, I'm very excited for people to read it. Once again, Mitch, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to start playing us out. Any last words for the Obsessive Viewer listeners?
Nope. Glad you didn't have to see Wonka. I think if I see that Hugh Grant Oompa Loompa in a trailer one more time, I'm going to lose my fucking mind.
Same here. Yeah. All right. Well, next week we're going to end the year with an IFJ Top 10 Best Films episode. Until then, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. For the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, such as early access to episodes, TV, book, and movie reviews and reaction recordings, commentary tracks, and Patreon potpourri episodes, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. Like the flashback scenes are like actual, like verifiable facts because it is recorded. Whereas like other things about the nature of their relationship are things that are said without concrete evidence, or said by someone who may not have the best intentions in telling in giving testimony in the case. Different things like that. Like I can see that. Like I can understand that. That's fine. But I do wish that some elements of the relationship and some elements of it were kind of explored a little bit deeper if they weren't going to have that flashback. Any flashbacks to really flesh it out. In addition to that,
this podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.